Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. In the world of fitness and coaching, few names resonate as deeply as Dan John. Known for his practical wisdom and no-nonsense approach to training, Dan and I have been exploring the classical tale of the sword and the stone for the past few years. Dan highlights how intentional communities can create environments where individuals not only achieve personal goals, but also contribute to the collective well-being, much like a well-coordinated team achieves success together. Dan also delves into the history of war, exploring it through the mythic narrative of The Sword and the Stone. This timeless story, popularized by T.H. White's novel and the Disney's animated film, tells the story of young Arthur, who pulls the enchanted sword from the stone, marking his destiny as the future king. I love The Sword and the Stone, and it's been an honor to share these conversations with Dan. In a world that often feels divided, his insights remind us of the power of unity and the timeless value of learning from our shared history and stories. Whether you're a coach, an athlete, or simply someone who enjoys reading, these lessons are as relevant today as they were in the time of King Arthur. I'm grateful to call Dan my friend and love the opportunity to learn from him. You don't have to have read the book in order to enjoy the conversation, but I highly recommend it. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with others and rate it on your platform of choice. The best thing you can also do is help me keep this podcast going and support the work I do by becoming a patron of the show. You can do that on my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Dan. Nice to see you.
Hello.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's a lovely day here in Murray. We're kind of through that little heat dome thing. The lawns are all hay, but my tomatoes are growing great. So, and I'm treating, and life is good, and things are good. So it's good to see.
Amazing. We had a decent tomato season as well, Oscar and I. That's like the only thing that grew this year.
Well, my mint always grows. My mint is historically great. I don't even know how I keep it back now, but my sunflowers are coming up, so life is good.
What do you do with the mint?
Mostly just rub it in my hands and smell and make me smell good. I make mint tea and I just give it away. I mean, I can give you it's so much. I mean,
mint can do that. It can kind of become its thing.
Yeah, and I love it. So in my bees, I have 4 beehives this year, and they're all doing really well. They're gonna get penthouses on them pretty soon because they're growing so fast. So
you have beehives?
Yeah.
And you get honey?
I have a guy, his name's Chris.
Okay.
And he runs a company, but I like having the bees. I get some. I really don't. He offers me a lot more, but like one year he told me, that I was going to get 75 pounds. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with 75 pounds of honey?
I'll take some honey.
Well, but the problem is getting it out to you.
I know. That's amazing.
Yeah, so
you're not scared of the bees?
Oh, no, of course. No, in fact, they're very, no. Bees are an incredible beast. They are, my biggest fear is walking barefoot through the clover over there, because they'll sting me there, but near the hives, they don't bother you at all.
Wow.
I could probably walk past the hive, and as long as you don't, just mind your own business, you're fine.
Right.
Hive, it literally might not survive. Yeah.
I don't know. I get a little panicky. I don't know that I have like an anaphylactic response, but any insect that bites me, I get really swollen and I get really irritated, like kind of an allergic reaction.
You get that mosquito bites, yeah.
Yeah. So I generally don't want to be around any flying thing that can sting me or bite me type of thing. So
exactly. Yeah.
But I love honey.
Yeah. So it's great to have the bees. They're great. I'm trying to plant a lot of native flowers, and the bees like them. The bees love my clover. I have white and red, and they love the mint. And when I come back in a couple of weeks, I'm sure that things will be exploding. So there you go.
Amazing. Well, that's exciting. I did not know that you had like the green thumb kind of thing, and that you did.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Well, it sounds like things are growing. That's
well, yeah, but that's just because things are.
That's nature. Nature doing its
pretty
thing.
idiot proof. Yeah, if you let it do its job. But yeah, so things are good. I'm putting weights over my head still, and
Of course.
yeah.
I know that you've from your Wandering Weights have that. I'd love to hear a little bit actually about your intentional community. You do workouts and also discussions and
Yeah, so I'm involved in a number of them. Intentional community is this idea that we come together for a reason. So, in fact, today we had 11 people working out with me this morning in my home gym,
okay.
which is big. I mean, and we were missing one of my throwers. That'd have been 12. So you get together, you show up, you talk, you're kind to each other, you help each other out. You show up with your interest. I have the equipment and the knowledge. Your enthusiasm makes me work hard. My equipment makes you work hard. And then we also have another group, a financial group. It's called Bumpers, based on Nick Peterson's book. We meet once a week and we have these discussions like, I had this goal of raising a certain amount of money in a couple of months, and I nailed it yesterday. So it's a big number. And sometimes a decision will come up, like in January, I was going to pull out for teachers and preachers. There's a thing called 403Bs. It's like a 401k, except it's a little different. Mm-hmm. And I was going to pull the money out and do this thing, and we had the conversation. I was like, "Do you really need the money now?" And I go, "No." Well, since that time, I've almost added a third to that portfolio by just not touching it. So when you're in community, sometimes in the conversation, you might come up with an idea. This I need to do, save money. This I don't need to do, take that money out. This I need to do, more front squats. This I don't need to do, more tricep extensions or whatever, so you win. It's a win-win on both sides. You're expected to care for each other, be kind to each other. And I think it's the best way to make a gym or group work. Yeah.
Yeah. You would know better than I. What is that is actually kind of the definition of community now, like being kind and what is the derivative? How do you break that down?
Common union. So it's the same phrase as the Catholic communion idea.
Okay.
It's common. We have something common together, whether it's whatever it can be. We live in the same area basically for this one, and we're coming together to be united. The community unites. Common union, community, and pretty simple, and it's true. And I strive for that in all kinds of parts of my life. The word you got compassion. It's walking with somebody in the tough times, Mm-hmm. Companion is a great one. It literally means to break bread with each other, to share bread. Panos being bread. And it's just, when you break words down sometimes, it just unpacks some things we've forgotten about. So my companions are, like, for example, today we all went out to breakfast. And so not only did we have communion, we had companionship. So
yes.
I ate pita, but that's okay. Close enough to bread.
I'm sure there's a variation on that works as well. Yeah. But I love that. I mean, how do you, I'm just so curious about it. It's like, it's a word of mouth thing, invite only? Is there like a special envelope that goes out with gold seal on it and a wax,
let's go through it. Like, I did a workshop for a local gym chain, and I told the people, here's my phone number, here's my email. If you want to train with me, ping me, and one person out of 100, TJ, shows up. I went to this cafe a couple weeks ago, get a cup of coffee. And as I'm going to sit down, this guy looks up and says, "I follow you." And I'm like, what? Like, what, you were driving behind me? He goes, no. He's with his wife. And then he got embarrassed. He goes, "On Instagram and your podcast." So he and his buddy Dale and his brother Will showed up. So just remember, and it's a hard lesson of life. 1 in 20 people exercise. 1 in 20 people floss their teeth. 1 in 20 people actually read books. Everyone's an expert on fitness. Everyone's an expert on politics, but only 1 in 20 people actually do anything. So if I'm in a group of 100 people and I give my home address, maybe 5 of them will ever reach out. Generally, it's not even that. Usually it's the 1 in 20 of the 1 in 20. So I've changed my direction. on helping the world, I'm only going to help people who show up. I'll be at a party and people start asking about losing their whatever, muffin top or their saddlebags. And it's like, everything I tell them is a waste of my breath and their hearing. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So you got to serve those who show up. And that's just, you just have to. You can't, I can't convince anybody to exercise. I can't convince anybody to save money. Listen, every person listening knows that you should save 10% of their money, because that's just a given. You should probably go for a walk every day. You should lift weights 3 times a week. You should sleep 8 or 9 hours every night. You should eat veggies at every meal, right? Everyone knows that. Nobody does it. But you know it. And you know it's the right thing to do. But you don't do it. Yeah. And I can only deal with so many excuses because, I'm 67. I just don't have that much time on earth. I can't convince that many billion people to do what they know to do is right.
Yeah.
When we sit down with students, I remember Coach Mon, 1977, he gave us a secret to getting good grades at Utah State University. He said, go to class. And the strangest thing is, of course, track and field programs, he used to say something I still think is hilarious. In track and field, you only recruit 2 things, speed and smarts. We can train and coach everything else. So, obviously with you're in a Division I track and field locker room, you got some smart people, but he was right. And the athletes who faltered were the ones who got drunk, got stoned, missed class, and got behind. And those who did fine got up in the morning and went to class. This, right?
Yes.
You know it.
100%.
And yet you'll sit down with somebody years after, like the one young lady I talked to, $47,000 in loans to go to the Arizona State University, ends up the first year with a 0.0 GPA. Paying off that loan probably still now, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's an expensive party.
Yeah.
and everybody knows what to do. Nobody does it.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny. I love that simplicity of just making a goal and intention, because my dad, Kung Fu gets very mystical and people get, oh, how do you do this? Like, there's the splits or these moves. And he's like, oh, you practice it. He's just super, super direct. Like, oh, you know how to do it? Do more of that. You want to be able to do this? Practice it. And he's like, oh, do more splits. Oh, do more squats. Do more, whatever it is. And they're expecting some, ancient Chinese secret.
Ancient Chinese secret. Actually, was it palm olive?
It's like, yeah, here's what you do. But I love, it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because Oscar, my husband, who's been not just he's not a follower because he's not big on social, but read your books and lived by a lot of the things, actually implemented some of your works and your workouts and things like that. But went to, I think there was some sort of, I don't know if it was a marketing group or something, but obviously he's seen you speak many times. But he goes, yeah, Coach Dan John just gives his phone number out to everyone. And I was so shocked. This is years and years ago. I mean, this is a really long time ago. And I was so surprised. And it's just hearing you say like, well, only like 1 in 20 would use it. And I'm super private. So I would, that just kind of like freaks me out that you do that. And I'm like, see, if I were there, I would have just called you like the next day. I would be that person. But, Oscar's pretty shy. So he was like, I'm not going to bother Dan John. Well, so.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, it's, and that's, I have this 3-part success formula. I stole it from a magazine, actually, in total candor in 1996. I was subscribed to something. It was called Success. And honestly, the magazine came out, it was about this big every month. It was just so small. And show up, don't quit, ask questions. And I have yet to find a better success formula than show up and don't quit. The ask questions part, if you show up enough and you don't quit, you'll have a really good question about, 3 years into the journey. You have a lot of dumb questions for anybody. I always love those. You can always tell when you go to a college, the people who've never taught, they'll always say something like, now, there are no such thing as dumb questions. It's like, yeah, I've been teaching since 1979. Folks, yeah, there are dumb, and there's ignorant questions, and there's lazy questions, and I don't like lazy questions.
Yeah. I
I
don't like
like
lazy
clarity.
answers.
Yeah, I like clarifying questions are always fine,
Yes. Yeah.
but lazy questions, why do we need to do this? Go somewhere else. Do what they do.
Yeah, I'm really loving this. And I feel like you've had this philosophy for a bit, but I feel like maybe there's been some sort of turning point that's made you go, I am only investing in those that actually are showing.
Oh yeah, it's so I don't want to beat this horse to death, but it's
Of
time.
course.
5 years ago, my brother died, and that started the whole downhill spiral
Yeah.
with Tiffany and I to ended up in her death because of those tragic reasons. And since that time, I've been meeting with a guy named Patrick. Patrick is wonderful. And one of the things he's really worked with me on is a thing called boundaries. And I suddenly realized that once I figured out that I need my own boundaries. And me spending, I used to go to parties, and I can remember at my high school reunion. So it was my 40th, I think it was, because my 50th is coming up right away. Next year will be 50th high school reunion.
Wow.
So, there you go. So when my dad went to his 50th, he was the only living male.
Wow.
Yeah, things have kind of changed on the old. Folks, smoking is bad. Thank you. Depression, war, and smoking are all bad. Okay, end of sermon. But I was just standing there, and this guy, a husband of a classmate, just started asking all these fitness questions. And I probably stood there with somebody I'd never met before, half an hour, ignoring all my classmates, all my St. Veronica's classmates, all my Southwood classmates, all my South City High classmates, all my teammates, talking to this person. And I can guarantee they never used an ounce of my information.
Right.
And so what I've done is I've come up with some boundaries, and they're not always crystal clear in my head. But one of the things I realize is you can't, I can't keep promising. I can't be your self-motivation. I can't be your self-discipline.
Yeah.
Even if I give you the most simple, practical answer in the world, the pushback I still get. Like when I tell people you should walk every day. Well, how far? 22 feet. Well, that's not very far. Well, shit. I mean, darn it. Well, you're not doing anything now. 22 feet is 22 feet farther than you've been doing. Get your butt off the couch and turn the TV off and go for a walk. You got to drink water. Oh, here's a classic one I got. You should eat veggies at every meal. What do you mean by vegetables? Just turn around and walk. You're too stupid.
Well, that would be a stupid question, right?
Yeah,
that goes under the stupid question category.
Yeah. I mean, I charge a lot of money for consultations, a lot.
Yeah.
And, I'm giving you this information for free. And you know what people do with free information? Nothing.
Absolutely.
And so it's worked out for me. And the reason I did this is once I established that simple boundary, if you ask me for advice at a party, at a reunion, at a wedding, at a funeral, I'll give you advice. If you push back on anything that's simple and logical, I know I don't know what you want, but I know I can't help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Normally they want you to validate what they already think they know or want to do.
Yeah, but a person who's self-loathing because of their lack of physical fitness levels, they generally know exactly what to do. But I can't be
Yes.
I can't be that wire that connects those two.
100%. Boundaries are super important. I've learned this along my journey as well. I realized that I cannot be therapist and Kung Fu Sifu. Like that's those beyond the scope, crossing the line. And I've really been intentional about that. So this is totally understand.
and that is now a major part of my life, is getting the confidence to say, no, not not on my watch. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people just take advantage of your kindness, and that's unfortunate. But I am very glad you have boundaries. And before we
Yeah.
jump into the sword and the stone, because we, of course, will, I did want to thank you again for always putting out such great information that sometimes, and even in your sword and the stone writings, you'll say, I'm the only one reading this or writing this and reading this. But I'll tell you that is not true, because this is why that I get to talk to you all the time, because my husband's like, Mimi, you're going to want to talk to Dan John about specifically this, not just all the other things. But one of your wandering weights was you are not good enough to be frustrated. And I did an entire podcast just on that one phrase from your inspiration. And I totally stole like your story and I shared that. And I mean, I told everybody it was you, of course, but I was just so motivated by it. And this is a while ago. I mean, it's been on my list of to podcast about for whenever you wrote, like a year or something. It was a long time ago, but it was so on the nose for so much of the Kung Fu students that I teach. And it can be applied to, of course, anything where, you're looking to be an athlete of XYZ sport or whatever. But it was just so on the point. And I got so much feedback from that podcast that I just kind of went up. Basically, I just ranted for like 40 minutes. But so many people it resonated with, and just kind of putting it in frames for martial artists. And so thank you for that. And it was, I know you have a lot of followers and viewers and listeners, but it then resonates with so many more people. And then just small pieces of your context has now also reached totally different demographics that aren't, in strength and conditioning necessarily, but it's helped a lot of people. And I've gotten feedback on that, and the reframing, and maybe has allowed them maybe to get on a better path for how they, consider themselves a martial artist or in their training field. So thank you for that. I want you to know, like, what you write makes a difference. And
thank you. And you used a great phrase right there, Mimi. You said reframe. And I think sometimes what people have to do is reframe. And I go back to the same meeting where Coach Mon, I remember sitting down, I go, what's the secret to discus throwing? He said, lift 3 days a week, throw discus 4 days a week for the next 8 years. Well, if you're only 1 year in, you have 7 years to go. And if you're frustrated after 1 year, like when I towards the end of my throwing career, I would get frustrated and I would just catch myself like, you've earned this frustration. Go home now, 50 crappy throws isn't going to make you bring out a good one. It's okay for you to be frustrated, little Danny, pat yourself on the head, go home, hot tub and take an ice bath, and all the world will be good again. But when I'm working with my young throwers and it's like, I just can't get this, I will wind up with a story about, I have tons of stories about being injured or, just stepping up, my sophomore year in college with a spinal erector pull. Oh, worst injury I think you can get as an athlete. Oof. Being unable to sleep or walk and stepping up in the ring and throw because I had to qualify for the state meet. And then you kind of fold your arms, So you really want to go there, or whatever it is, yeah. It's a good thing to remind. And that's another reason why I think intentional community is so important. In my intentional community, we have a 19-year-old who already started an IRA, and he's already maxed it out. As a 19-year-old, he maxed out his IRA this year, and it's set in a situation that he's never have to worry of. He does that for 4 or 5 more years. He'll never have to worry about retirement. Mm-hmm. But he's going to be around people 40 years from now who say, you were lucky or something.
Right.
You weren't lucky. Everybody had the same opportunity to go to get a job, take a lot of their money and put it aside. We all have these opportunities. You can't, if it's the grasshopper and is it the grasshopper and the ant story about the ant that is works all
working,
work.
Yeah.
And the grasshopper just plays his
playing the fiddle or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, when the winter hits, the grasshopper wants to eat the ant's food. And I guess that's one of those anti-socialism stories were taught as kids, I guess. It just get in my head. But there's a truth to it. I mean, you work, and then people think you're lucky, you know. And by the way, I find that frustrating when people think I'm lucky.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. Somebody said one time, I was born with the gift of writing. The gift? That's like the gift of being a good discus thrower. 15,000 throws a year for 41 years. Show me where the gift part came from. I will go into my computer sometime and I'll just find these files, and they're like 20 and 30 pages of the word vomit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously starting to try to write a project that failed miserably. But we're talking volumes of stuff.
Right.
Like, and I was about to say it's a joy,
Well, for our listeners that don't know what I'm talking about, I'll reference the podcast, but I will read this portion, which kind of was the jumping off point. It's, if you spend 17 years mastering your craft, you might be allowed to tell us you are frustrated. If you spent 17 minutes, please pipe down and try again. And so that was really my jumping off point for, yes, thank you, Dan John. Thank you, Coach Dan John, because especially with Kung Fu or any art form or sport or anything, but like, people come in and, like you said, after a year, they're okay. When do I finish? Or what's the next thing? Am I a master yet? And I'm like, oh gosh, I've got people who've been here for 15, 20 years that consider themselves maybe intermediate. Does that help you frame your thinking? Yeah. But I don't know.
In fact, I was just talking to somebody about Dave Tate's, the way he judges programs. And I think I've got all four correct. There's shitty, sucks, good, and great. And to go from shitty to sucks is so much work. Yeah. To go from sucks to good might take a decade. Yeah. And then to get to be great just takes another. And I love that phrase. I laughed out loud when I heard him speak at that one thing, because it's like, you nailed it right there, big fish, little pond stuff. Yeah.
I am with you. I mean, my students are always very excited when I go, well, not horrible. And they're like, yes. I was like, they get enough pats on the back from,
everything else,
their parents who love them unconditionally. They don't need that from me. But in any case, Sword in the Stone. So you and I have been on the edge of 10. It's jumping into 10, coming towards chapter 10, which is Robin Wood. And we talked about last time, actually, where they were pulling the bow and arrow
so we're through.
So we did get in there but we kind of like, you actually started sharing so much about the type of bow as well, and arrow, and that was really cool. But I think this is the part where we started to kind of get into Wart finding his voice and saying, like, trust me. And I thought this was a really nice parallel, because of course it's a book on education, but it's like when you give youngsters, and we were just talking about students and everything, a little bit of a mission, a purpose, or even a sense of responsibility, they actually then find their growth and maturity, right? That really kind of spoke to me a lot.
So if I've looked at the book as a chiasmic story, and if that's true, so the story builds up the central part of the book, and then as you go into traditionally it's called the climax and the ending, but all the separations that you see in the first part of the book, there's this middle story that clings everything together, and then everything starts to tie up on the way down. That's the chiasmic structure. So the thing to remember about this is the center part of the book. The chapters we're in now are 3 chapters where we're going to meet, the people of the wood. Then we're going to go into battle, and then there's the post battle. Now, you have the copy of the book you have actually has a painting that's important. I think I've told you this before, but in the copy of the book you have, if you'll turn to blah, 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 blah. I'm just making noises till I figure out. Okay.
Okay. Is it 129 or no? No, that's where he's pulling the arrow.
It's the plate after the oh yeah, it's the one on 145. Okay, if you go to page 145, 144, there's a plate.
Yes.
Okay, so you see that rendition?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the artist's original rendition.
Yeah. Amazing.
So we are, yeah, and I bought that a few years ago. So we are getting to some of the best parts of the book. And by the way, because of Wart's injury that he's going to get in this battle, and it's a not a terrible injury, but it ties us into a whole other series of stories too. So we are at the top of the mountain in the story right now. It's one of the few stories in the book that goes more than one single chapter. It's 3 chapters.
Yeah, like a short story within a story.
It does. It can sit by itself. Yeah. Yeah, it could. And in this story, you're going to see a massive transformation of Sir Kay. He'll later be, Kay, who's going to be later Sir Kay. And what's going to happen in this is that this is his adventure. And he's going to be, Kay is going to be the hero of this story. Mm-hmm. In every, by the way, folks, there's 3 different versions of this particular story. The one that Mimi and I both have, the one I think is the best, is very uncomfortable. The bad guys are very bad, and the queen is extremely ugly. Now, in the later variations, they cleaned up the queen, and then later even made it just basically a fight against a griffin or something like that. It was a very simple story. The one we got cannibals. We got people who eat people. Mm-hmm. They're going to have a feast. Oh, and also too, it's a surprise attack on these guys. It's not a friendly attack in the version we have, where in the other 2 attacks, it's a bit of a fair fight. But the way you defeat evil is you just start shooting arrows into them and don't ask questions. Is kind of the moral of the battle that's coming up. So where we are in the story right now is all the things we've been studying start to show up. Now, there's almost the only magic in this particular story. There's no Merlin magic here. It's all evil magic. Mm-hmm. It's all evil creatures have. And the people who are fighting them, none of them are, Kay later, of course, Arthur later, of course. But these aren't royalty. These are people who care about lost friends. This is a bunch of rabble, like my family historically. And they go in and they're gonna save the day for everybody in the forest, and they're gonna wipe out all the bad guys. So it is a fun story, and so go ahead, ask your questions.
Well, I feel like it's interesting because we, like you said, this is for Kay, right? This is really his time to shine and like kind of turning point and everything. But I guess one of my questions I could think about is, since this is kind of a standalone within the big story, you still consider this though, like, even in this part, especially this part, maybe like the education, because it feels so, like you said, it's like beastly, and then it takes a turn in this not Merlin magic, so it kind of gives you a breakaway. But there's still there's always lessons to learn. But is there any other theme that's in there other than this is Kay's lesson, and he's obviously going to learn a big thing from this, because it is pretty gruesome in terms of like, they've got to eat they're going to be eating their servants first or whatever before the next part. Yeah. It's like, you're like, wait, what? You went from
later we have a story about Galapus, which isn't in the Once and Future King version, which is too bad. And if you get a chance to read it slowly, Galapus is this big giant who's and it's funny because Merlin kind of defends him in the story. He says, he's not asking much. He's just, everyone's being mean to each other. It doesn't work out. In this particular section, don't forget, Hitler and Mussolini are running. Of course, I got to be careful in these day and age because, I'm not a fan of fascism and Nazis. Okay. But it turns out.
Well, that's good to know.
in this day and age, there seems to be people who are, which
Yes. I've seen them on my streets.
breaks my heart.
Yes, it's very
And
heartbreaking. Especially
and
we just had the 80th anniversary. Or was it I'm
yeah,
sorry,
80th of
the
D-Day.
80th anniversary? Yes.
And if you get a chance, they're family photos, but my aunt Florence was Eisenhower's. It was a chauffeur, secretary, helper, and we have pictures of her and General Eisenhower in Marseille weeks after this. So my aunt was right there, and of course many other people too. For those of you who like Star Trek, the original series, James Doohan, Scotty on the show, lost fingers on D-Day. He was in the first waves.
Oh,
So,
okay. I didn't know that.
and for those of you who like American baseball, Yogi Berra, the great skipper of the Yankees, he got hurt on D-Day, but he would never talk about it. He got a Purple Heart, but we don't know what happened because he never would talk about it. Folks, real people gave up their lives for freedom. In this story, D-Day hasn't happened, but Hitler is already starting concentration camps. Mussolini is already destroying Italian farming. And there are bad people in the world. And this story is an idea of how you deal with bad people. You shoot arrows at them.
Mm. Yeah, and they were very intentional about saying, like, no, this has to be a surprise attack. They're wasps and must be destroyed like wasps, and otherwise they'll fly away and their troops would melt away before us in the undergrowth. So the only way is deadly arrows, and we need to do it in the darkness in the evening. Oh, because they're holding a feast, though, right, or something.
Yeah, because you're going to eat one of their friends, yeah.
So yeah, I guess because I am very, very unknowledgeable about any sort of military tactics and things like that. I mean, I read The Art of War. I don't know if that counts, but like, I'm not versed in that. Like, it feels like, I don't know, is this like a typical military type of planning, or are they just kind of like, we're going to go in, and is it more clandestine? And like, I guess which faction? Because you've got the undercover groups that you never get to hear about. We only see movies that sort of portray what these military units do. I have family in the military that I'll never know what they really do because they can't tell me or something. But then, you have the general troops and whatnot, right? So I don't know. What is their plan? Is this very typical war battle planning, I guess?
There's an old phrase, all's fair in love and war. And yeah, so this, it was interesting because in World War I, early in the war, for whatever reason, people don't realize how brutal World War I was. 1 in 4 young British men died in World War I. 1 in 4. So if you look at your high school yearbook and you look at the boys, 1 in 4 are dead. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at your high school yearbook and just mentally start Xing out 1 out of every 4. But for whatever reason, they decided to bring back morality in war, and they would argue that this was ungentlemanly and all that. When fighter pilots first went up, they would wave at each other. And then later they start shooting each other. Huh. So World War I is probably when the last gasp of this idea that war is a chess game. Mm. Okay. That's my high school football helmet.
Oh, very cool.
War is not a chess game where we sit down across the table and we start moving people. War is hell. And, I just remember, of course, growing up my dad had his stories. My uncles had their stories. My brothers had their stories. And, trust me, the last wars we've had have been very, there's nothing gentlemanly about what happened in Korea, Vietnam, our Middle Eastern incursions. Mm-hmm. And it's been so war has changed, and the problem is I mean, you can see it go. You can see it live right now in Gaza, and I don't want to get on sides because it all do upset people, but there was a terrible event that started the whole thing, and then terrible events after, and
Yeah, it's
every so often I'll tell someone will say something along the lines is it's not fair, and my thought is, well, yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, there was a lot of innocent, wonderful people that morning in Hiroshima.
yeah,
There were
yeah,
in Dresden and 9/11. There's a lot of fine people in those buildings, and this is just boy, that went dark fast. But I think so what you're seeing here is you're not seeing, T.H. White. It's interesting when you think about the influence World War One had on. If you read Lord of the Rings, J.R. Tolkien was there. His Mordor was the Western Front. When you read Wittgenstein, Wittgenstein, the great philosopher, he was there. So many of the writers were there, and it impacted, well, in the United States, Hemingway. He was there in the Spanish Civil War,
yeah.
trying to be a volunteer and, for the good guys. And well, who was the good guys? Yeah. So I'm rattling, but I wanted to make sure I got, that's an important point.
Yeah. And one of the things I think now that I'm looking at your notes too and everything is like the directives, right? It's just like you wrote something in your notes, which was they had learned to listen and remember because there's specific, like Robin is giving the orders or saying, here's what you do. And most people couldn't read and write in this story and stuff, but which is possibly historically, when you think about battle, people who are going off to war, they're not necessarily the scholars that they're throwing on the front line. And so like that skill of listening, and then following, and then like listening and learning, right? And remembering. So there's just something there. And last time we had talked about memory, wrote like closed and open loop learning and memory. So interesting.
So I used to teach a course to teachers on teaching, and I always used that section on when Robin Wood is explaining to the troops, and that whole listen. So one of the things I think is lost, and I think we talked about it last time. Pure rote memory is a gift. When if I'm in a group of Catholics and something bad happens, we will huddle together. No matter how bad it is, we will huddle together and say common prayers that everybody knows the language. There is, whether you like the Pledge of Allegiance or the Star Spangled Banner or whatever, we have a common language as Americans. When I say we, the people, it is a common language for all of us that we understand where we're heading when I say that. So there is a great value in rote memory. Sadly, in my life, I've seen us move away from it. Fortunately, I'm very pleased. My daughter's education, both of them, they had to memorize a poem a month. And my daughter, who still teaches, laughs because she goes, oh yeah, when it's time to teach the state capitals, I have a song. When it's time to teach, just about everything, she has a song or a ditty or a phrase to teach it, because that's how people learn. That's how people remember. In Spanish, the word for remember is recordar. We would say record, but core is the heart. It's to put it into your heart. And I know in your martial art tradition, you're expected to put things into your heart. You don't just learn them. Mm-hmm. You know them so well. You know them by heart. And if you have to correct somebody on it, you almost have to think to yourself as the instructor, you don't really know this as well as you should. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things also that you had kind of outlined as you were rewriting, I find it actually fascinating because you're actually retyping out the book in addition to then dissecting it. And this is the part where you were like, I think I'm the only one writing this and reading it, but see, not true. But you learn something new every time you go to do it and every time you read it. And I was just sharing this with a bunch of competitors that have a tournament this weekend.
Oh,
And I said, I was a competitor many years ago. I haven't been a competitor for a long time, but I can tell you that through my years competing, or, when I would go to revisit, just because you've competed many times, it's a different experience. You're a different age, you're a different exploration. So when you go to train, you have to approach even the same material and relearn it differently, because whether it's a book you're rereading or whether it's a kung fu form you're doing, again, at this stage, at this age, at this level, with the information you have now and the experience, it all changes, and you learn so much about yourself, and you learn so much about whatever the subject matter is. And this is such a one of the reasons that I even started to go, oh, I want to be in book clubs where we talk about each chapter, and then you go through it, because then you get another chance to kind of revisit. And in this section, it really talks about that, like, kind of listening and learning part. But I really like the concept where you're literally typed it all out again, which must have taken forever. But
yeah. So that your listeners know, I sat down with the book and I typed the entire book plus all the additions that changed. So I did the British version from 1938, the American version for 39, and then the One Sing Future King version from 1958. I think is when it finally came which of course from that 1958 version came the Broadway play Camelot.
yes,
And that's with starring famously a young lady by the name of Julie Andrews, a guy by the name of Robert Goulet, and another guy by the name of Richard Burton. I don't know if any of them's ever made it. Oh, and Roddy McDowall was the no good Mordred. That's a pretty good cast, people. And so I retyped the entire thing, and then I would discuss after it. And it took me 4 years to do it. And you have a copy of it. You have a copy.
I do. It's like
put it on your put it on the show notes.
It's my cheat sheet.
Yeah, put it on the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my cheat sheet.
Oh yeah. And if any of you ever get a chance to retype a famous author, very quickly you pick up some things. Not only do you record it in your head, but it just pounds out things. Like, I think a lot of my ability to, I have an ability to do alliteration quite well in writing. It's just natural to me. I'm pretty sure from the rhythms of my mom speaking. But there are some things that the little hints, the sarcastic asides of T.H. White, the weird depth at minutia sometimes that makes no sense until like 20 pages later when you realize that minutia is pointing you into other directions, Mm-hmm. I don't know. So I picked up all that by retyping his work. Yeah.
Just 4 years, huh?
Just 4 years. I wrote a couple books during that time too. So yeah,
I'm sure it's fascinating to me, and it makes me think, what book would I retype? Like, which? I don't know. I don't know what I would take on like that, and it's I think because it's daunting, right? You just go, oh,
it's terrible. I mean, think about it. I mean, open up the book here. Let us all children now open up to page. On Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, it was court and semiologicals. So my first day, I think my first week, I got that. That's what I typed up, I think, and then commented on it. And there we go. I might have just got the first paragraph. Mm-hmm. And here we go. I've had, in my career, I've done this for other things. Like I used to go back and retype. I would retype articles about people's training programs.
Okay.
Or retype. This is from 1970. This is Al Feuerbach, probably 1974. His training program that you can't see it because it's a little.
Yeah.
Right. This is me handwriting the entire training program. It's because I wanted to put it here.
Right.
Not just, oh yeah, I liked it. No, don't like it or love it. retype it, rewrite it, spend some time doing it. For those of your students who are trying to learn something, have them recopy what they're supposed to do. Write it down. Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about the act of doing that is super important. It's kind of, I guess, wrapping this chapter, because I know you have to go soon too. Yeah. It's like one of the things that I'm like a happy ending. I love like the movies where, they're coming back and they've won the war and there's the parade and then the knight kisses the lady but they do get a bit of a moment, right? Kay and Wart, where they're kind of victorious, and Marion sends them, because obviously he's got now the big crush, I think by then, right, already on Marion. But I just closed my book, which I shouldn't have done. But basically, they do kind of get their moment to shine. Have you?
And everyone's wondering what the boys are. They finally wake Merlin up after his fifth nap. And he says, they'll be here at, 4:05 or whatever it was. And then the nurse loses her mind over Wart's broken collarbone. And yet Sir Ector is so proud of Sir Kay. Kay. And what's nice about that particular thing is it really does set up kind of long-term, kind of I don't know. It's the first time Kay has probably ever earned something in his life. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important change, which is why, I was talking to somebody and they're bitching about how hard it is for, especially for a guy like me to coach the current generation of athletes. They've been getting most valuable player awards since they were in the second grade for, being on a team, and they get, they have more trophies than I have,
right.
in fifth grade. But there comes a time in someone's life where they earn something, and all of a sudden it just clicks and changes the way they look, the way they feel, the way they act. I've earned. And when someone you don't give out a black belt, do you? Do you give them out?
No. we do something a little different. We don't have black belts, so to speak, but I know what you mean. You mean like when they test and they have to earn their accreditation, their levels. Yes. No, we don't give it out. I do hear other schools, though, if you pay enough money, you can buy them and everything, but that would be the sign of a non-traditional school. Yeah.
And the thing is, when I'm sure all your listeners have a thing in their life where they realize, there'll be some silly thing in my, I just typed up, I just signed my last will and testament and everything. And when I did my funeral pre-planning, they asked me specifically what I want at my funeral. And I said, it was funny because it was like this, and this. And they said, do people know that? I said, everybody who knows me knows that's what I want at my funeral. Those are the things I've earned in my life. Interesting. One of them is a tiny, tiny little trophy from 1967, which I earned.
Yes.
And then some of them are like national championships. But it's the things I've earned in life that I want to be buried. Well, not buried with, but be at my final. See you later.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important lesson as soon as possible, as early as possible in one's life that they can get that earning something will be meaningful, because we definitely are in a bit of a culture of a trophy for everything, a merit for everything. I was kind of, I guess I came off as kind of mean because someone's like, oh, my child's graduating. I'm like, oh, from high school or college? Or like, no, it was like, an elementary school grade. When I was like, okay, yes, like great, you're going on and all that. But I'm like, they get a graduation for like every year now or something. And I was like, what?
Yeah, they do.
That's my graduation.
Yeah, they do. Listen, I've got to bounce. Okay. I'm sorry.
I know. Yes.
But let's do this again soon. And folks,
thank you so much.
DanJohnUniversity.com. Mimi's going to have my short notes. What is it? An eighth of a million words or something like that?
They're like, 174,000 about.
That's just where you're at. I think it's bigger.
Okay. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Mimi, and we'll talk
Thank
soon.
you so much. Thank you for your time today. It's so lovely to see you as always.
Sorry, I got to bounce. Okay.
No problem. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.